having tours in Afghanistan, obviously, I want my friends who are still over there and those who I haven't met to have the best tools with the easiest tools to do their jobs. And military personnel have a lot of glass balls that they juggle. And so if we can really make the tools that they have less complex to use, then that's going to be really helpful.
Welcome to Tough Tech Today with Mayan and Miller. This is the premier show featuring trailblazers who are building technologies today to solve tomorrow's toughest challenges.
Well, welcome to Tough Tech Today. Today we have the honor of speaking with Katy Person. Now I want to say on a sort of personal, professional level, Katy and I have been working together for a couple of years through the MIT Innovation Initiative, where we've co-authored studies on innovation ecosystems associated with like the Department of Defense and the ways that it can improve the way that it's working with young companies, venture capital, et cetera. And more recently, we've been working together on articles that help speak to entrepreneurs who are building these technologies so that they can get the help they need to be able to steward them toward both the private sector and in some cases toward government as a client. So with that introduction, Katy, could you tell us what your role is at MIT currently?
Yeah, so I'm the program manager for mission innovation programs. It's evolved quite a bit since it was stood up 2 years ago, from the research that you talked about to right now, really the focus is dual use, ventures and incubator structure around that to help them find federal opportunities as well as commercial marketplace.
So then you must have, must be seeing startups on a daily basis. And I think it'd be great for us to dig into that. But first, I want to clarify the term dual use. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, in some sectors, it's kind of a dirty word because we associate with misapplication or misuse. But like just dictionary wise, it's a technology or a venture that has a military application, but also a commercial enterprise or consumer application.
Now, when you say military, do you mean that the application is only the military, or it could be a government application in addition to the military? I'm just coming from like the space perspective of sometimes we have stuff that's dual use for space, but not quite the military.
Yeah, so I've thought a lot about this and kind of wrestled with it. And dictionary wise, just literal, it is military. If there is a space application that can also be, maybe the core technology can also be shared in a military application, then that would be a dual use technology.
What would be maybe an example of a company or technology that historically has gone sort of down that pathway of serving two somewhat different kind of client or customer bases that we would retroactively apply the term dual use to?
There's one that I work with that's a smart engagement platform. It's something that they started with commercial application. It probably traditionally isn't thought of as a military application, but since the Department of Defense is so large and probably the largest single entity that buys things, it buys all business enterprise solutions. It buys all medical kinds of devices. And so it also purchased this smart engagement platform.
How much would be then like the enterprise, like traditional kind of corporate enterprise products and services? Is that fairly like a one-to-one mapping onto that the government broadly, like the US government, let's say, would be potentially a customer of these products and services?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the nuance is that the Department of Defense is a long time, it's a legacy organization, and it's very slow moving with a lot of bureaucracy. So to actually replace a current system is either very challenging or just not going to happen. And so when they when the government, when the Department of Defense procures something, it really has to look at what it already has and see first if it can be improved, because it's just so expensive to replace these kinds of legacy systems.
The companies that you're working with, the startups, are these all MIT affiliated companies? Are they current students? Are they people who have been graduated a while? What's sort of the makeup of the types of companies that you help?
It's really a mix. Most of them are alumni. Some are postdocs. Some are recently departed postdocs. Many of them have PhDs from MIT. And so they have this long history with MIT and have been in this ecosystem for a while.
And is it always MIT technology that is licensed from MIT, or what's the basis of the technology?
Not necessarily. There are some companies that license out lab-based technology, and maybe they're a postdoc who was in that lab and that was something they saw a commercial application for, or government application they wanted to spin out. But a lot of times it's something somebody worked on, maybe what we consider dorm-based, but maybe the other organizations consider it garage-based, that kinds of technology. Definitely companies formed around that. Since this is a tough tech podcast, we also emphasize tough tech. So we do prefer working with lab-based, or at least where the core of their technology was from a lab, and maybe it's evolved since there, or maybe part of it still is in the lab.
With your role and so our pre-existing associations with MIT as a preeminent research institution, it's phenomenal on many levels in that respect. However, with the dual-use ventures and the kinds of companies and technologies that we've all seen over the past decades that have evolved, would you say that, what would you say in terms of the non-MIT folks? Because that's the majority of folks, and there's no reason that the good ideas would only come from one particular group that's in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So are you seeing some kind of trends, or in terms of the ecosystems that are outside of say Cambridge, Massachusetts, that are producing some of these cool technologies and great teams?
Yeah, so the only ones I really work with are MIT, but I am on a lot of calls with the Department of Defense and startups, tech startups that are trying to also apply for a certain solicitation that's hosted by the Department of Defense, usually the Air Force. So it seems like a lot of the startups, the tech startups, are coming from Texas, from Austin, and other various, usually Austin. I don't hear a lot of people from California. Not as many from Silicon Valley as I would think. Definitely from the DC area, maybe just because they're more familiar with federal government and opportunities. I just attended one that was hosted also by the Ohio, I don't know if it was the state of Ohio, one of their agencies, and that's because of the link with the Air Force Research Lab being located in Dayton. So that's a hot location as well. But yeah, it's a little bit of everywhere, and it's being based in Cambridge. I would always think, oh, it should be completely Cambridge, but it's really such a small portion when I attend on these calls that are actually from Cambridge or even greater Boston.
What types of things is the Department of Defense doing to partner with these small companies? Is there any? It's a slow-moving organization, but what sort of innovation are they trying to do to speed up, the cycle of funding, so these companies don't starve before they can get a contract?
Yeah, so in the last maybe 8 to 10 years, there's been this huge ramp up, and really in the last couple of years, with the creation of AFWERX has really led the way in their contract cycles, how fast they'll award money from the submission of the proposals, who they're reaching out to, because a lot of those solicitations are very precise with what the DoD is seeking. So AFWERX created an open topic solicitation, and there has been at least one joint solicitation in February, where if you're in a general, if your technology or company meets a general theme, such as flying orbs, which is the flavor of today, then you can propose for some funding and for a contract. So that really like opens up the reach of who can apply and who should be applying to these solicitations. Each of the services has their own way of thinking about innovation and how to reach more people. The Army has the Army Applications Lab, which is really focused on connecting with VCs. And that's really been their target way to meet new people, meet new startups, and see what's in the market. The Navy has Naval X, the Naval Agility Cell, and they have these tech bridges where they're located on naval bases, but they're really for startups to reach out to and say, I have this great technology. Where in the world how do I interact with the Navy? And that person plays the role of matchmaker to the program executive office within the Navy that's working on that kind of work.
There's a lot to unpack there with what you said. That's a lot. So I think maybe a contextual question could be helpful in terms of, okay, I've heard what you said in terms of like there's the different branches of the military have their own ways of doing things. If I'm an entrepreneur or maybe a family member or a friend is working, hoping to get into this space, could you help me understand the overall process by which the Department of Defense thinks about some of like new technologies and how it goes about the acquisition process of that, which I understand is a little different than on typical startup land where we're like, yeah, I got acquired for like, hopefully millions of dollars. It's a little bit different meaning of the word in the military.
Yeah, so I understand your question in kind of two different ways. So if I'm a startup, it kind of starts with what kind of startup are you? Do you have some kind of scientific discovery or technology mechanism that you've engineered that you think you can place into that will solve some kinds of different problems? And in that case, you have to figure out what your use cases are for that and how you can really scale that innovation, whether it's building out a system, whether it's retrofitting it for different use cases. And that's different than maybe if you're a team of engineers and you want to solve interesting problems and you have an area of expertise in, X, Y, or Z. And so the latter is it's a classic DoD entry point. You have this area of expertise, you go through DoD-cybersitter.mil or .gov, I think it's .mil. You look through all of the solicitations, you see which one fits, you apply to it, and hopefully you get awarded your contract. But if you have this technology, this scientific discovery that you want to get into the DoD process, that's really, it's only been until recently that you can easily. So that would be an open topic that the Air Force regularly hosts, and sometimes the other services add on to their joint topics. That would be maybe these different challenges, like AFWERX challenge. SOFWERX has different challenges. They're saying, we have this problem, solve it in any way you can. So you could bring a biotech solution, or you could bring a human, a robotics solution, or whatever your area of expertise. If you think it fits, then you can propose a solution. The other way you talked about your question is from the DoD's perspective of how they want to integrate startups. And it really kind of feels, and I don't like saying this because I do originate, my early career was in the military and in government, but it does feel like sometimes the small business set aside is an afterthought.
What's the small business set aside? What is that?
So the small business set aside is specifically for those businesses that have fewer than 500 people, or depending on your NAICS code, when you're trying to figure out where you fit in the government and what you're offering, there's a specific definition. Maybe if you're nanotechnology, it might be a certain dollar volume that identifies you as a small business. But then you go and register as a small business with the federal government, and then you're able to apply for small business set-asides, which are specific solicitations that only small businesses can compete for. And I see these as kind of in two buckets. The DoD has the regular BAAs that are not tech-based. These are a lot of service-based. Maybe you're a landscaping company and you need to mow the lawns, do all the landscaping for Hanscom Air Base. And that's maybe a small business set aside. But then the tech, in 1982, there was a federal directive that came down and was initiated, and that established the SBIR program, the SBIR program, Small Business Innovation Research. And so that's where engineers and scientists, if you want to work in that field, that's where you go to either SBIR.gov, National Science Foundation has these, NIH has these, and then DoD, SBIR.gov has these, even the USDA has these. There's a tremendous number of agencies that are required based on their budgets that a certain percentage is mandated that it has to go to small businesses.
Now, when you have a startup that is thinking about pursuing dual use ventures, and maybe they have some VCs or people funding them, what's kind of the reaction that you see from them, and are you able to communicate the value of pursuing a dual use venture, or sometimes it's just not worth it?
Yeah, it's tough. I think if a tech startup has really a lot of VC interest, then the VCs are going to steer whether they want that startup to pursue DoD contracts or government contracts. May not be in alignment with their requirements for ROI, which Jonathan laid out nicely in his blog series that's on the innovation.mit.edu website.
Check it out.
But it's tricky, right? Because VCs, depending on the VC and what they want, if they're comfortable with DoD contracts, it's really going to depend on whether that fits into the startup's business strategy. So it's all, DoD is not for everyone, and it's not for every business. It just kind of depends on whether you come in really mission focused and you say, you know what, I have this aerial navigation system, or whatever it is, and I really see it on Navy ships. Like, if that's how you come in at it, then that's where you start, and then you see whether there's some commercial applications for Maersk or for some other major ship companies. But it just really depends on your business strategy.
Oh, that's really interesting. Are you seeing what kinds of technological trends are you seeing, and how has that changed over the past couple of years?
For what the DoD is seeking?
Well, I'd say it's on the DoD side. That's certainly part of it, though also because of your role working within the startup ecosystem, where it's not just sort of the market pull or tech push. There's a little bit of both sides of that market, right?
Yeah. With the startups that I talked to, there's quite a few that are in robotics. Some are in hypersonics, although it's hard. A lot are coming out of labs with cancer research and saying, you know what, I know DoD pays money for good research. Is this possible? I think kind of a lot of those, there's a little bit on sustainability, but it is mostly very classic defense kind of things, or very classic healthcare kind of things coming out of MIT, from who I get to see at least.
Well, that's interesting that on the healthcare and sort of medical side of things, are you seeing what kind of influences are you seeing from, say, DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and BARPA, the Biological Advanced Research Projects Agency?
I don't see either one of those. I understand that they're, they do a lot of funding. They do a lot of SBIR cycles. They're rolling SBIR cycles, at least DARPA is. I actually don't have BARPA on my, I'm not watching it as much as I am the other ones. A lot of times we don't necessarily recommend DARPA because it is so either early or specific or oversubscribed with applications. But it doesn't mean that it's not. I mean, if that's what your lab research deals with, and that solicitation matches, that's definitely a worthy opportunity for funding your research.
So where's the most undersubscribed area?
Yeah, there's a lot of.
I guess it won't be undersubscribed once everyone listens to this.
Yeah,
finds out the secret.
So yeah, I think if we held that, I mean, I've heard rumors that sometimes they just pan out. Like I just go with the rumor and I tell a startup, I heard this rumor that nobody's applying for this STTR. So I do hear that STTRs are generally less applied for than SBIRs, particularly in DoD, because nobody knows what an STTR is. And that's different than NSF. NSF is widely subscribed. Everybody in universities have heard of National Science Foundation, and there's wonderful commercialization programs like ITAR to help gain some traction with NSF. I think as far as volumes of dollars, when we look at, it's like almost $2 billion from the last data batch, which was, I think, 2018, for the volume of SBIR and STTR dollars that strictly DoD issued, as opposed to the second largest was NIH, and then the third largest was the National Science Foundation. And that went all the way down to Department of Education has a program, and USDA, Department of Energy is pretty high up there. I think that's fourth, I want to say. I'm not certain. So there's probably 8 or 9 agencies in there.
You mentioned that you have some background through like Army acquisitions, and I know that's not the only part of your background that I have and that is relevant to this. What keeps you engaged and really working to help continue sort of developing this a really important part of both startups and the way that the government is able to benefit sort of collectively?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. I think having tours in Afghanistan, obviously, I want my friends who are still over there and those who I haven't met to have the best tools, with the easiest tools to do their jobs. And military personnel have a lot of glass balls that they juggle. And so if we can really make the tools that they have less complex to use, then that's going to be really helpful and more effective. I think the other side to that is that the DoD needs to access the largest amount of human capital that it can, so that it brings in the best minds to solve these tough problems. And the SBIR and STTR programs are probably the largest mechanism to do that. And so this is a great opportunity for people who are interested in helping be part of the solution with these tough problems to come in and to contribute. And then the tough part is really getting it through the acquisition system into a phase 3, into that like integrated into a major defense acquisition program, where maybe a tech startup's algorithm is then part of whatever it is, aerial delivery system or a space.
What percentage do you think makes it to that part?
I think it's extremely low. So Jonathan and I have talked about how the trough of disillusionment is between phase 2 and phase 3. And so, for your audience, SBIR and STTR has a phase 1 and phase 2, but then phase 3 is not under small business dollars. You're either lucky enough to get a sole source and you've really made a compelling case, which I think is rare, or you compete against large major defense primes. So probably the best way to cross that trough of disillusionment is to potentially partner with one of those defense primes to get your piece of the puzzle into a larger contract.
So then for the listeners, then that means that if we're okay on phase 1, congratulations. Phase 2, we're going beyond like a prototype stage, maybe some semblance of what we might call like a product market fit. But then phase 3 is now, it's kind of like the gloves are off, and we are, as a little company, up against Boeing, Lockheed, and all the rest. Is that a correct assessment?
I would kind of fine tune it a little bit where depending on the solicitation, a phase one can sometimes, it's technically by definition a feasibility study. And that can be both in the technical sense, or some of them are simply making sure that you're finding the right customer. Like for some of the open topics, they give you that 3-month contract to identify whether there is somebody in the Air Force who says, yes, I absolutely need this, I will run a pilot with it. Phase 2 is where you're completing your prototype and actually putting it into a pilot program, running it, testing it, maybe not a formal test like you might think of ATAC, or the government has very formal testing procedure, but this is kind of just a pilot program to see how it goes. And then phase 3 is, in a lot of ways, it's kind of like your equivalent of production. If you're a tech company and you're not going into production, it might be maintaining an algorithm or a piece of software or whatever that is that you're that you've developed, maintaining it, polishing it, making it better, that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely for that next phase and going on, that it really helps to have partners. Just to plug, Draper is a place that you can come to, help find some people that can help partner with you. We work with a lot of the DoD customers, and love having companies to help integrate into some of the systems that our customers want.
Yeah, and primes have figured out ways to work with startups because they recognize maybe that they're attractive to have some new kinds of innovation happening that they're a part of, or if it's maybe it makes their proposal to a major contract more attractive. They need maybe small businesses to be a part of it, or a company from North Dakota, like whatever it is. And so all of those defense primes have some way of interacting with startups. Some are through investment, some are strictly through vendor services. BAE Fast Labs claims to be through strictly vendor services, whereas Jonathan, what was the company that, maybe it was Lockheed Ventures? What was it? It's actually a VC, right?
Yeah, Lockheed Ventures and Boeing Horizon X, which has some sort of like an accelerator component to it for sort of quasi venture capital and dual use, and help build the startup all at the same time. The United States Department of Defense is, of course, a major influencer in sort of the global military industrial system, but it's not the only one in town, certainly. Could you help us and our listeners or viewers sort of paint a little bit of a contrast between maybe like the DoD and NATO, or some of the other major influencers globally?
NATO, what I've heard from talking with startup founders and also with members of NATO who run these kinds of organizations, is it can be help. You can both apply to the formal solicitations, but then you can also kind of run pilot programs where you're kind of they may not be investing initially, but maybe you need the data or some kind of create an agreement where you're providing them something for free until they buy it. So it is not entirely different from the DoD, where they do have the ability to sole source, but it's not widely always accepted. The other kinds of organizations, I'm trying to think if there are. Did you mention any other ones, Jonathan?
No, NATO, though. Of course, there's some of the other nationalistic militaries, like whether it's China, Russia, Israel, et cetera, that would be maybe not NATO, but also probably very different way of going about their business.
How do we measure up with our innovation approach? Because this seems like it's a competitive point for the United States, right? That we need to incentivize, our technology in a better way than other countries can.
Yeah. So I think to address, first, I don't want to miss the opportunity to talk about ITAR, which, if you sell to the US government, you have to get it approved before you sell it to another government.
What's that? I'll put you in the spot. What's that acronym mean?
International Trade and Regulation. ITAR.
International traffic on arms.
Traffic and arms.
So,
And arms.
there's so many acronyms in this field. I know
Arms
it's difficult to keep
regulation.
track of.
International traffic and arms regulation. Is that right? It may not be right.
Yeah,
there might be some.
I believe that it is. In space, we deal with it every day, but
Hence why we call it ITAR.
If it flies in space, US only, then let other people worry about the rest.
So basically the Department of State has to approve whether you can sell to another nation. And a lot of times you'll be surprised that something is considered under ITAR regulation. I guess that's redundant. Under ITAR, if it's a piece of software that, is specifically crafted to go into a US aircraft or like a US Air Force aircraft, then that is under ITAR, even if it has commercial applications. So it is very pervasive. Yeah, when we talk about competition and whether DoD is able to keep up, I mean, that's like the elephant in the room. Like, I think it's accepted that the US can't keep up with China. China is able to strategically fund companies in a way that we're not able to, whether it's because of case law or because of the population size, human capital in deep tech areas, all kinds of reasons. And I really fear that the US, we don't have enough students or young people who plan to go into these deep tech areas so that we have this human capital in the future. And so I think this is like to me, this is the number one national security issue is this. We need more US citizens, Americans in STEM and going into STEM in the future and mid-careers transitioning into STEM to get this expertise and at least know how to apply it and work it, even if they're in policy or in some kind of other, just understanding how to work with it. And it's also the basis to the future of our economy. So, it's the heart of our future in national security and economy. So it's a really big deal. And I think Congress has recognized this through their proposal, their bill for the National Science Foundation to get even more money and to be called the National Science and Technology Foundation. I can't remember what the bill is called, but this just came out a few weeks ago. And so there's definitely plenty of attention to this, but it's really feels very far off to me.
Is there a role or an opportunity with, say, the newest branch of the U.S. military, the U.S. Space Force, to be able to, from the ground up, sort of refresh, rethink how acquisitions are done, and to expedite it, perhaps to get a little bit more toe to toe with some of the other military groups globally?
So I think some of the infrastructure they won't be able to, like the regulation is there, the federal acquisition regulation, those are solid in there. They're hiring everybody brand new because it's brand new. So there's the potential where they could hire the kinds of people who can think in a little bit different way. Whether they're doing that or not, I don't know. And certainly it sounds like their leadership is committed to being more innovative and recognizing and trying to solve as best as they can these acquisitions challenges. And so I think that in and of itself is the first step. But it is not going to be without its own challenge with already built infrastructure, with the regulation, the case law, all of those kinds of things that they're founded in.
So not quite starting fresh.
No.
What's your favorite part about your job?
So I get to talk with a mix of DoD people who are trying to buy things or trying to be that matchmaker, that innovation cell. And then I also get to talk with these startups. And every day my day is packed with 8 meetings of, maybe it's 5 of startups and 3 with DoD, and trying to put together the puzzle. Mm-hmm. And so as long as I can add value to both systems, both kinds of people, then I get a lot of gratification out of my job. So hopefully I am. If you're listening and you're one of these people, please lean on me to continue to do this.
And that's a good lead into some of your most recent work in terms of growing MIT's STTR program. How do you feel that this program, which my understanding is it's currently for like MIT affiliates, it's kind of restricted to that, which is a large pool, fortunately. However, it's not everybody. So how do you feel that this could become a model of one way to help foster that sort of academic linkage and the deep or tough tech research that's going on to make it so that it supports not just the private sector, but also the public more broadly?
So with the STTR, the startup's always the lead, right? So MIT is the subcontractor to a startup in each solicitation, which really kind of is a bit refreshing, puts a lot of onus on the startup, and also emphasizes our faculty, Dr. Fiona Murray's model of the 5-stakeholder model, where all of the stakeholders come to a round table. So government isn't calling all the shots, or industry isn't calling all the shots, university, VC, startups. So startups get, they are the CEOs, they are coming here and they are the primes for these. We are not the first to do this model. I definitely know of at least one other university that's doing this. And I have to credit Louisiana Tech for creating this and doing this. And there's a lot of interesting models out in places we don't suspect, and leveraging federal opportunities where they can be leveraged. And so hopefully this model is replicated. It can be a little bit of a hard sell when you're talking about a $50,000 contract and MIT is getting $15,000 for 3 months. We go to central office and they're like, you're not very high on my priority list, maybe. I don't know if that's what they say, but I feel like they could say that, because $15,000 and it's the same amount of overhead as maybe a larger contract. So there is that negative for universities and nonprofits doing this. But we hope to touch as many great MIT deep tech startups that need this kind of education and programming around this so that they can apply in the future and get their phase 3s.
The work that you spoke on it's like almost a whole different world in terms of vocabulary, mentality, the philosophy of the work itself. How are there some resources that you have found useful and that you may suggest to our audience that they can help get smarter about some of these topics that you've touched on? Because there's a lot there.
Yeah, definitely. So SBIR.gov, for sure, that's the first place anybody should go if they're thinking about applying to federal opportunity. They have a great eligibility guide on there, so you know whether you're eligible. Even if you have VC investment, it will walk you through whether you're eligible for these kinds of opportunities. There's a private, it's a nonprofit, Eastern Foundry, and they have a series of videos to get you kind of through these, some of the more bureaucratic, okay, register on this site, and then this one, and then this one, and then this one. And as you go through this is really helpful. And so Eastern Foundry has this great website, all these tutorials. One of the other is the National Science Foundation has their timeline on their website, and it breaks down what the, first you apply for, you write your 3-page pitch, and then if you get accepted, you apply. This kind of timeline is really useful for any kind of agency. DoD doesn't make you do a 3-page pitch first, but NSF has so many people who apply, so they need to add this step, I suspect. And so it breaks down what this process is and what the times look like, and that it may not be exact for other agencies, but it at least gives you an idea of what you're looking at.
Thank you. I'll also put in a plug on your behalf for MIT Innovation Initiative's work usually under the banner of Mission Innovation, the thought leadership that you, Dr. Murray, and a whole host of other folks on the team are continuing to build out to help document and provide some directionality to the entrepreneurs, the academic researchers, the government representatives and everyone else that's within this stakeholder system to be able to make things go smoother and get built faster and in a more healthy, safe way. Katy, thank you so much for investing your time with us today. It's been a real pleasure to. We've worked together in the past and into the future. Now to be able to share your knowledge with our audience is it's such an honor for us to have you on the show.
That's very kind of you. Hopefully I didn't get too much into jargon, and I'm happy to go, dig into any kind of specifics, in future episodes or questions or whatever that you hear from your audience.
I love that. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Tough Tech Today. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a like on YouTube, subscribe, and hit the bell. Or if you're listening as a podcast, please leave a 5-star review. In 2 weeks, we'll be sitting down with Will Dixon and Trinity Torres of FedTech, a startup incubator and accelerator that helps companies commercialize their technologies through the support of the federal government.